Exton, and I am calling to order the Curriculum, Instruction, Accountability, and Assessment Subcommittee meeting on Wednesday, May 20th. Ms. Miller has let me know that she intends to record this meeting, so I am letting everyone know that this meeting is being recorded. We have one item on our agenda, and Mr. Cardin is not able to be here this morning. We have one item on our agenda, and that is district goals for 2026, 2027. And I'll turn over to you.
So I shared with everyone last night where we are with goals right now, and I have, very small update that I can share with everyone. We have been very much tweaking these. Usually our process is to kind of do the status update, which now this is the second year we've done that, see kind of where we think we are with the things that we said we would do this year. That helps us kind of know, okay, what's the next step for next year? We put that up against the strategic plan. And I think the challenge this year has been that the strategic plan, we're now headed into year 4, and some things have pivoted, and some priorities kind of by necessity of reductions and stuff and consolidations are not things we feel like we'll necessarily be focused on, but are in there. So there are a couple of things that have also pivoted, and AI has become a bigger conversation, and digital tool use in the classroom and how we want to prioritize that has become a different conversation. So we're trying to fit the goals into the current landscape. And I think that has just been a different kind of exercise this time. At the same time, we've done a strategic plan. We've started on a strategic plan status update. That piece of it. So let me share my screen real quick. We're kind of doing all of these together, and I was hoping to give the goals. I was actually hoping to do goals at last week's meeting, but due to the challenges I just articulated, I wasn't in a place where I wanted to share with the full committee before I had a conversation with you all. And then at the next meeting, I was going to do a strategic plan status update. What this does is gives you in every initiative in the plan. Within each initiative, there are strands of work, and each of those strands have milestones attached to them. So this lays out the initiative, the different strands of that initiative, and all the milestones for years 1, 2, and 3 for that initiative, and provides the current status of those 3 milestones, the actions we've taken towards those milestones, and a narrative that explains it in a little bit more detail. If this is the right approach vector, and I actually think I might need to ask Mr. Cardin explicitly because he's the one who asked for this, then I'm happy to keep going. What I'm finding, however, is that this is extremely time consuming, just because I'll forget something. And so we need a little time to kind of remember all of the work that's happened, dig into the examples, write the narrative down. And so just getting through, I'm not even through priority 1 yet, and that took me many hours. So I'd love to know if this is on the right track, to know if there's other information folks would like, and then this may need to take a little more time in the summer, depending on what I could carve out in the next couple of weeks. I can have a cabinet team dig into this with me too. I just was trying to get my head around how I wanted it formatted and the best way to approach it. So I'm happy to talk about that. That's not the goal for today. What I'd really love feedback on today are the district goals. So what makes the most sense, Liz? Do you just want me to walk through them?
Yeah, I think just start by walking.
And I'll explain kind of where we're at and the logic. And then, okay, Mona's here, and Mona, fill in anything I miss on this. So for priority 1, we wanted a goal that would speak to some of the changing landscape that we're experiencing and the conversations we've been having around technology and AI. But we also didn't really want it to be about AI, because I think that's part of, for us, a larger conversation having to do with when we use digital tools, why do we use them? When we have kids in front of screens, what's the goal? But we also didn't want to lose sight of the deeper learning and an angle of the work we're doing. So the way this one is phrased is really trying to put an emphasis on the tools students use and building out teaching practices that are very much in support of deeper learning, things like student engagement, well-being, collaboration, experiential learning. The AI shows up in the artifacts that would provide evidence of progress. So I haven't done this for all of them, but I did want to give you one example. I think some of the detail of the what is going to get worked out in the outputs. And I think Mona and I can probably speak to what those would be. We just haven't mapped that out yet because we're still working on the goal language. But for this one, for example, we'd like to build some visions for how we use AI to support deeper learning. And we know that we're going to be refining our policies and procedures for use of technology in the classroom. We plan to reduce the number of devices that we're keeping on hand at the elementary level, for example. We've already vocalized to K2 teachers, for example, they'll be sharing groups like iPads. We've already shared with families going into Gibbs that the Chromebooks won't be going home. So we know that that is happening and that that implementation is going to take some adjustment and that we're going to have to adjust also our refresh cycles and work with capital to thankfully lower some costs there. At the same time, we don't want to take with AI a, all or none approach. I think that turning it all the way off with kids doesn't teach them the skills to use it critically in this world. I think we can't teach information literacy today and not talk about AI. So we'd like to build a vision for technology and AI district-wide, make sure that it's aligned with our vision and mission, and make sure it's prioritizing those deeper learning tasks. So that's one example of kind of how the outputs might take this vaguer language in the goal and make it a little more concrete for the committee. We also know that from the Math Pathways Committee, there's going to be a recommendation for a curriculum review in collaboration with teachers, school leaders, students, and families at the K-5 level. Mona, do you want to say any more about that one?
No, not necessarily, but I do want to say, just add in like what you just mentioned around the AI work. I just want to name that there is an element of adult development that needs to take place in addition to student development. And so we're kind of balancing both with this goal. So it's kind of like multi-pronged. I just want to name that. In terms of the K-5 math curriculum review, I think it's just evident at this point that we need to do a review. I think we've used the curriculum for a number of years at this point. A number of districts have made the shift from Turk investigations to other curricular options that are more up to date. And so the review would be similar to what took place a few years ago prior to my arrival with the ELA review. But the goal was to make sure that we're using the most up-to-date curriculum that also reflects our priorities around deeper learning for students.
So that's the second one. Do you want to talk about MTSS, Mona? The MTSS one?
Sure. So this year, Dr. Holman and I visited every school to provide an introductory to MTSS. And so our goal moving into next year is to think about how we are supporting schools with implementation that is consistent across all schools. Right now, I would say implementation is taking place, but in terms of there being practices that are similar, there's a little bit more variability right now. And so our goal is to provide, again, similar to the first goal, provide a level of adult development that still is needed with understanding and implementing MTSS efficiently. So providing that support to our educators and our leaders, while also thinking about how we use data that is collected through MTSS to make decisions that help adults with their own professional learning and professional development.
So it's kind of the like getting small part of the sort of bigger goal we had this year. For priority 2, I'll be perfectly honest, this one, it should be 2.1. This one has changed, I think 20 times. This is 3, correct my numbering here. What we're trying to do, and we do see a lot of evidence of this that is hard to quantify, but maybe we'll see some of it in the survey that we are doing with staff right now. We're trying to build this culture where we can talk about hard stuff, we can look at data that's uncomfortable, we can surface challenges that we're having, and learn through that. And not feel defensive or threatened or, whatever. And so we're starting to see a lot of traction with that. I actually think this year's, ironic as it is, this year's budget challenges were productive in some ways, in that we had to have some hard conversations. And so it built people's resilience for that. We have talked a lot as a leadership team about the desire to have in SSTs as part of the MTSS work, but also in ILTs and also in our leadership meetings, regular inquiry cycles where we're trying a thing, we're articulating a goal, we're trying something small to implement with a specific data outcome that we're watching for. And then we're looping back to see if we had the impact that we intended and then adjusting. So regular data-based inquiry cycles. I firmly believe that if we do not do this as a leadership team, we do not understand what it should look like on a teacher team. And at the moment, we monitor all sorts of data. Like I will occasionally dip into attendance data and then send the principals a report, but it's not built in. It's not scheduled in. This year, we tried on the administrative team with the PD schedule to build this around some rounds. So we had like 4 cycles in the admin schedule, and we did rounds in each cycle. We did a workshop in each cycle, but they didn't quite connect up with each other. So we want to get very intentional about this, practice it at the leadership level and practice it on the teacher team. So have a very concrete, like, okay, leaders, here's what we're looking at in student data today. Here's the shift, like identify a shift you want to see. We're going to practice this strategy. Could you use this with teachers? Go implement it, bring it back. Look at the data again. And so we've been trying to get closer and closer to that. I think we're in a place now where we're ready to do this. And so that's kind of what this is oriented around. However, this has said everything from that to implementing all of the restorative justice, collaborative problem solving, like a focus on professional development and expanding professional development. At one point, it had something around like teacher pipelines and pathways for both teacher leadership and certification. What I don't like about those goals is that they're not as within our control. Sometimes we can build a partnership with the university, sometimes we can't. Sometimes we can build up some new programming, sometimes we don't get the grant. So I don't want to like pin us to something we don't have as much control over, which is where this one came from. But truly, this is like Mona and Allison and I grew this 5 times. So we're up to
is the sort of the difficult conversation or the uncomfortable piece around whether it's principals or teachers, like feeling like this is about me
Blame.
doing something
Yes.
wrong,
Right.
as opposed to like
us doing something together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand.
And I think that manifests in in IAB meetings and relationships with families and like in all sorts of ways. And we practice it when we're together.
Mhm.
And what I was actually talking to, one of the things the Superintendent's Advisory Committee is working on right now, they actually just did one of these little inquiry cycles. We're working on how administrators communicate with teachers. And they have pointed to communication as being a real sticking point that disrupts relationships. And so they went and gathered examples of communication they've gotten from administrators. It's been really great and really not great. And they anonymized it and we all looked at it together. And then they surfaced some themes and then they went and talked to administrators and said, okay, what advice would be helpful to you? And then they brought that back. And now they're generating their recommendations. So it's that kind of thing. But what was really generative about it is that they were able to build some empathy for administrative roles because they would build a recommendation and be like, well, that's not going to work. We were all able to kind of look at some data to ground the recommendations. And they were also able to sort of surface, okay, these difficult conversations are sometimes easier with somebody who I'm very close with in proximity or who I work with regularly. Sometimes it's more difficult because I don't want to wreck the relationship with them. But always when they say it's really good, it's because they've been through something hard with someone or they've had the difficult conversation with somebody. They're like, well, we need to have more. It's like, so it's doing the kind of work that builds the sort of resilience for hearing something challenging and figuring out a path forward, even if everybody isn't on the same page with it, even if everybody doesn't agree on it, that we're trying to build some capacity for with this. I think, Mona, thoughts? I've rewritten this since the last time we went back and forth on a Google Doc, so I don't know where you're at with this one either, frankly.
Yeah, no, I don't have any additions. I think you summed it up accurately. I think we're still in a process where people are um understanding what it means to receive feedback and how to digest that and how to make changes and adjustments. And I think this goal helps us kind of work through that at a pace that meets educator needs. So I don't have anything additional to add.
That's that one. Keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. Negotiations. That's all. We need to do that. And hopefully we can do that in a way that helps us with some of the other goals. For 3, our operations priority, building project for OMS, and getting through that and having all of the engagement that we're going to have as part of the feasibility project. The implementation of some of our restructuring in central office is going to be a huge focus for me, for everybody on the central office team, frankly. And we're hoping that we can gather some feedback from educators and folks in buildings on how some of that is going, whether they're feeling like things have slowed down, whether they're feeling like they're getting the support that they need. I think we've built a lot of efficiencies, and you'll see that in the strategic plan update with some of the work that we've done. And we're trying to build some cross-departmental teams and project management skills in central office. And Casey's role is going to be a huge help with that. And so we're going to have her start with some project management and look for folks who might want to pick up some project management so that we've got departments talking to each other so that we're not siloed in central office, because then it just works its way through the whole system. So that's 3.2. Any questions on these two?
Paul, questions on these two? You've got it. All right.
Keep going.
Okay, all right. For 4, this is community engagement and families. We are anticipating a full launch of Parent Square next year. This will replace School Messenger as our emergency communications application, and should provide more sort of ease of navigation for families, because it puts kind of everything in one stream, particularly if you've got kids in multiple buildings. Ease of communication for teachers and families together, because it has a few other options that folks can choose to use during business hours. They don't necessarily have to. And Thompson's been piloting it. A couple other schools are up and running. I'm not sure if they've started using it yet or if they're working on the teacher training piece. But we know that this is coming, and we want to make sure that we give it its due diligence and training and all of the work that it will need to be rolled out successfully. And we won't have quite as many staff to help with that. So it will be sort of an all hands on deck effort for myself, the communications specialist, Dr. Thomas, and Casey probably are probably going to be the 4 that are deeply embedded. And then we'd like to do, and I sort of motioned to this when we were talking about rental fees, and I'm going to talk about it in much more depth at our next full meeting, conducting a district-wide review of after-school programming. I'd like that to be really comprehensive, including interviews with staff, students, families about programming at every single elementary school. It will require us to hire somebody to kind of do that work part-time or as a consultant. My goal is to put that on the revolving account that manages our after-school program, because that's an appropriate use of those dollars. So that is something that I'd like to do that so that we're working with information before we make a call on whether we want to go out to bid or internalize all of our programs slowly in a phased approach, and what kind of programming we're actually looking for. We've been working towards making sure that our ACE and after-school leadership are in our legal trainings, are adhering to APS policies, and that consistency has improved. And I think it's also given us a picture of kind of what it's like when that consistency is there versus what it's like when it's not. So that is the impetus for building some consistency. I've also communicated with our vendor programs that this is something that I'll be recommending. And I've emphasized to them that there are pluses in their programs that we can learn from. So if we internalize, like what I'm looking for, it's really, truly for all of our programs, what's awesome, what's challenging. This is not going to be an AASP takeover of all the programs. It's going to be a reimagining of all the programs. So it's going to take us multiple years. My honest, if I'm projecting forward, assessment would be that this audit happens this year. We have a planning year the following year, and as part of the new strategic plan, we're doing the doing on this. And that it's not something we're running at full speed. We're taking our time as a community, that we're getting people's input and being thoughtful about it. Because my goal, frankly, would be to have as many kids in school programming as humanly possible as a result of this reimagining. That's it.
Okay.
There are fewer of them. I think they are more concrete than they sometimes have been, and I think they are manageable and ambitious. So, but a couple of them truly have changed 8 times, so we're not adverse to input here at all.
Paula came off mute, so I don't know where this camera is. Go ahead, Paul, did you want to?
No, I want to, let me just say that I think it's a very comprehensive list. I mean, these are the high leverage things that we've been looking to do. Math pathways, K-5 math adoption. Obviously, we always have room for improvements in our collective bargaining agreement. And the after school issues and communication with parents and families are also pretty consistent things that we should be working on. I'm I'm pretty chill with this.
So I think the district goals and objectives look really good. It was very helpful to have you add the outcomes and outputs.
Mhm.
Because, as I read some of these this morning, I was just sort of thinking like, what does that exactly mean? Or
Well, so voice those, because like literally I could sit here and add a few notes and we could.
yeah. So like with the MTSS piece, and I actually think it's in the strategic plan where it talks about like communicating with families and other stakeholders. And so, I was like, and you went and gave presentations to all the schools, like has CPAC had a presentation? I'm just trying to think about like, I think that families hear MTSS. It's an education buzzword, but what is it like, and again, like even when you went to some of the schools, I'm sure some of the teachers were like, I hear this, but what does this look like? So I just wonder if, again, in a bullet point way over, outputs it, like, what does some school community engagement look like, whether it's just a building having that versus the whole, I don't know, but having seen that as a thing in the strategic plan, that was just something that I thought about there.
So that actually is one of the things, can we pause on that
Yeah.
for a sec? That when I was doing the strategic plan update, I was like, we have not done great with that. Like that was one of the ones that got a partial and some progress. And so I feel like there are 2 pieces to this. One is explaining the system to families. Like, what do we mean when we talk about MTSS? What are the pieces that are involved in this? What are the 3 tiers? That kind of what we did with teachers. Then and I've pushed on a few principles with this, and I don't think we're there yet. There's engagement with families, but some schools are like as part of SST. So there are some of our, frankly, the places where we have some of the strongest outcomes are places where there's more engagement with families earlier in a concern process, and sometimes even like discussion with or input from them as part of the SST process. That is not in all of our protocols at the moment. Was that a fair assessment, Mona? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I think a reasonable goal for next year is to do some outreach work I think a reasonable goal for next year is to build some consistency in implementation at the building level. And then I think the next piece can be how and when and where do we expect you to engage with families around when a challenge arises? And when are families informed when intervention is occurring? I frankly think they should always be informed when intervention is occurring. And are we consistent about that? Do we have tools to support that? Does that feel right as a trajectory, Mona? Or were you planning on doing more of the second thing sooner or later?
What second thing?
So like the more like for an individual student, individual family, when are we working with you as part of MTSS?
Yeah, no, I think it's all the priority for next year. At this point, I think it's a doable goal to prioritize both of those things or both of those
Okay.
areas. And also we did have an ask from CPAC to present, and it didn't work out scheduling wise. And so I think that,
Okay.
we also worked on an individual basis with some groups around sharing what we meant when we like use certain words or phrases. And so I think just in general, it's a natural progression to figure out what community outreach and education looks like at this particular point in time. And I think it's totally doable with all of the work that's taken place because we've set the expectations this year. Last year, we've kind of now had those expectations reinforced or stated and shared kind of now globally, school to school, educator to educator. And so we're all kind of out at the same playing field at this particular moment in time. And so I feel like it's perfectly fine to prioritize both of those areas because of that work this year.
I'm going to write it as plan and expectations, and then Mona and I can talk about whether we want to go a step further on that. But I definitely think like the parent group focus, that's doable next year. We've got like good time on it. Okay. And we've got the materials now too. So
Yeah.
Anything else?
What's that? So I mean, it's really just sort of like feedback. So then the 2.1, I'm not really sure where my comments fit. No, one of the things that I feel like we hear about, so like the principals come and they do their school quality plans, and then a lot of the feedback from the committee is sort of like, how do we get your really great absenteeism data at that school? How do we get your really great literacy data at that school? And I hope that that's some of what the intention is. So again, I'm not saying like, don't change. I know you've changed this a lot of times. I'm not saying change it again, but that's, as you were talking and all that, that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about. And I don't know if there's again an outcome, like
Yeah.
the sharing of, and maybe it's not like formal enough for goals, but like, yeah, that sharing of expertise across schools such that the strengths at one school are supported and implemented in a supported way such that we're seeing all.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. Because that's always a challenging question to answer insofar as like they'll say, and it'll feel vague. We're sharing constantly because they are.
Yeah.
And we do at leadership workshop for the last 2 years in a row, we've done this strategy shared session thing. We've dedicated a good chunk of like usually the second day to this, where they prep something that they feel worked and they show the data, like they link it to student data. So this has been a good start to getting this engine running. And then they like pick an area for the school where they're like, okay, we really need to work on this. Like, we've got this figured out, but man, we need a strategy for chronic absenteeism, for example. And then they'll look at other school strategies and decide where they're going to go. And they'll send people to those sessions. And so it's like kind of like a conference, but it's condensed down a little bit and it's very concrete. Like they get a sheet from us to articulate their strategy, the data that shows them that it worked, exactly what they've done, tools that the other school can use. So that's kind of been our approach to doing some of that concretely. Hi, how are you?
FYI, the heat has made the fire alarm go off at bracket already once,
Okay,
so
thanks.
they're back in.
Let me know if it happens again. Literal, like, we've had a interesting week so far. So I forget where my thought was.
Strategy
So
session.
yes. So we did that at ALW, but it feels kind of one-off. Like we haven't had a structure built in that follows us up on that. And so it gets hard to answer because we know they're sharing strategies. We haven't had a follow-up mechanism. Hopefully it builds in the follow-up mechanism. And I think what we've learned is that if we don't build that in, it doesn't happen. Like there's a gazillion things that we can be doing. And it is hard to find the time to slow down enough to like sit and look at data, build a strategy out when we have stuff headed at us. But it was truly our goal to slow things down and like get this figured out for next year. Because that's what's going to build that consistency.
Mhm.
So you should see that as a probably outcome, frankly. The challenge becomes how you measure it. Like ideally you'd see like a dramatic shift for one school who struggled with
Mhm.
math because they picked up a strategy from another school and figured out how to implement. So we can think about how to articulate that as an outcome. But it's difficult to quantify. It's always
Yeah.
difficult to quantify priority.
Yeah, yes, no, I agree. And I'm not sure that anything needs to change. And because I'm looking at the sort of like, there's the goal, right? Establishing the support culture. And then there's the 2.1, like the data and inquiry cycles, like using student data. I'm like, I don't know, like sharing of the strategies, but maybe it doesn't need to be in there. I don't know. All right, negotiation.
In the contract is the output for
Yeah.
2.2. I'll make that sound prettier.
And then the partners, goal number 4. Is there like currently like some kind of expectation around like, because again, this was something I saw in the strategic plan sort of piece about like, I think you said like what is regular communication?
Right.
And I like, is there even like a baseline expectation
Yeah.
to build on?
So there is at the school level, the baseline expectation of you're sending a weekly thing to parents.
From the principal.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And it's weekly at elementary. It's weekly or bi-weekly, I think is what I told them. You send something out on a routine basis. Families need to know when to expect it. And implementation of that has strengthened this year. Got a couple places we're still working on it. At the classroom level, our hangup became, maybe this works its way into 2.2. What felt like a shift in practice to teachers. And we got into a lot of back and forth with educators about whether that constituted a dramatic change in working conditions. Our take.
Can you say that again?
Huh?
Can you say that again?
So we got some pushback on the expectation for really concretely like bi-weekly communication or weekly something from the teachers as a change of working conditions. That should be left up to educators. So like that, we built a communication plan that had like this is the expectation built in. We feel that against the rubric, Dusty's rubric, it's reasonable.
Okay.
And I need to have some deeper conversations with AEA about what feels like a reasonable thing we could say out loud to everybody that's not going to yield a grievance because of a change in working conditions. I don't frankly know whether it would or not. if we were to say, send a biweekly newsletter. But I worry that it would, and I don't think we need to be fighting about this. And so it's possible that that could become a conversation that we have as part of bargaining. I don't really love this as a bargaining item. And we can have that conversation at another time. But that is what it's why there's a school-based.
I'd almost want to look at a job description, though. I can't believe a classroom teacher job description
Well,
doesn't say something.
And I actually don't know. I don't know if it does. That's a good question, actually, that I'm going to write down for us to look at. It almost doesn't matter though, because it is in the rubric. So, and I also think that what folks are imagining, and some of the examples you've shared have not really helped us out, because I think what folks are imagining is some like huge, elaborate
Yep.
newsletter.
Yep.
But whereas what we're talking about is just be the front line with a family.
Mm-hmm.
However, in places where the practice is, there's a challenge, pass it up to admin. And we have spots where that's been the norm. It feels like a really big change. And so that's where we're going to catch possibility for resistance. And so that has been a bit of a sticking point, and we have not gotten over that hump yet with the launch of Parents, where we were hoping that we could build that in. But like also we've voiced so many times, talk to like the person who can do something about it first, like the teacher. And from like at the district level, we have that protocol.
Yes.
And it has been very clear about like, unless it's a bullying complaint, unless it's something that is school level, and we give the examples, go to your teacher first, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to have a resolution. That gets challenging if they do that and it gets passed up to principal. So we need to build some skill, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And I think that one of the outputs could be examples of professional development that we're doing with educators to build some of that skill. It could be an outcome would certainly be that families are hearing from teachers about what's going on in the classroom, or maybe they're getting one of the things my son's teacher does is provide like questions I could ask at the dinner table. Very helpful. And it's little stuff like that we're hoping we can get more consistent across all classrooms. And I'd love to sort of pin it to, okay, we've got a new tool. Here's some ways to use it that are creative. Here are some ways some of your colleagues have used it that are low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Because I think it felt intimidating when we wrote the communications plan. So I don't know that rolling out a big district document is the way to go on this one.
Okay. No, that's helpful feedback.
Yeah.
But it's also helpful to know that, yes,
We wrote a district plan.
expectations placed, and
And we're working through the human part of that.
Yeah. And then, the after school, since 2018, I have been paying attention to after school. So I appreciate that it is actually like a goal on this thing. I think you've spoken to how complicated it is,
It's a long progress.
how sensitive it is to, different after school programs across the district. At the same time, 8 years that, this is something that the town needs. That's not changing. And so I appreciate that it's here. I appreciate that even in a time of not a lot of funding, this is something that we're gonna do some work with. So I don't have feedback other than I'm glad it's here.
Yeah. We need to work on it. We've made some positive progress. I've learned a lot just watching and building that after school report differently every year. And I think, we're ready to tackle this. So I'm ready to take it on.
And then in terms of the strategic plan status update, I would check in with Len. It's definitely helpful. I feel like it was helpful for me. I don't know that I personally need so much narrative. I know that it's time consuming. Even some of just sort of this, the status check thing.
Actions taken this
is yeah, I mean, and even just the sort of like, where are we, is helpful. I'm curious, the one, like some of the like not complete and sufficient resources, it feels like can be some are just gonna be like, sorry, we can't do this, and others feel like they might be like redirected to other.
Yeah, some of those I think that hopefully that comes out, and I might end up changing the status just as
Yeah,
like one or two of these, I was like, well, that's not quite right. I might change the status slightly,
okay.
and I'll explain why for some of them, like this one has a partially completed and a mostly completed, on two different things. Look at one of the ones that says sufficient resources.
Most of them are more like super aspirational. I'm not sure that they're
Yeah.
ever gonna come to fruition.
Well, and I think one of the things that I have really learned that will inform the next plan is that we not put things in the strategic plan over which we do not have a reasonable degree of
Yeah.
control and influence. Like,
Housing, yeah.
there are a few things in here, like the housing thing, that we just aren't in charge of. So probably shouldn't have in the plan. Things that are huge capital investments that rely on a vote, like the OMS project should absolutely be in the next plan. By the time
Mhm.
we're actually doing that, we'll probably know whether the funding is there or have an idea of where this is headed. But like, I don't want to anticipate that we'll electrify every building next plan because we don't have so much control of it. So I think we need to be more careful about that. I'm trying to look for one of the ones where like there's a caveat to the insufficient resource thing.
There's a lot
Oh,
of food, a lot of.
yeah, the healthy meals one.
Yeah.
We did, well, so there are caveats to these because we did do some space and furniture changes. We did add some AC. We have adjusted schedules in a couple places where we felt like it was doable with the space we had. I wanted to bump out several of the cafeterias as part of capital projects. That didn't.
Mhm.
And so that's the insufficient resources piece of it, but it's not that nothing happened. So those might flip
Mhm.
to a different status as I actually write it out.
And then like this, assist schools to implement timing schedule changes, not completed priority shift. Like, I think there have been, like, right,
There
like,
have been
we're adding a lunch at Gibbs.
Yeah.
I forget. And then but then at the same time, I was sort of like, how did the priorities shift? Because I think we still heard, even just last week, like, it is a tricky thing.
Well, some of it's shifted towards paying attention to what's on the menu because we have more control over that. So like we're gonna pivot because this isn't gonna happen. So let's at least make them more inclusive. And we have the resources for that. We can have her partner with Margaret. We can have her work with like,
Mhm.
so that's the shift there, which would play out in some of the actions that we've taken. This is a good example of one where the insufficient resources is technically because what we had in the plan was that we were going to add a role that oversaw all out of school programming, after school ACE,
Mhm.
and
Here for.
we never did that.
Yeah.
So insufficient resources, we just can't add staff.
Yeah.
And that's why that one is that way. So, and I'll explain that on the right side. It's not that we're not doing the work associated. We found a different way.
I see what you're saying. Anything else on anything, Paul?
No, I really like this whole setup of the milestones. I hope that it's not something that's going to be taking a lot of time. I think that it's something that's just sort of regular maintenance and update kind of thing, rather than having it sit on a shelf until it's the end of the year and having to go and fill everything in. But the formatting here, I think, is really good.
I will say it's been kind of a validating exercise to go through this and be like, oh, we did that and we did that and we're in the middle of that and we didn't do that. But like, it's been nice to kind of go through some of this and say, we've done a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And some of these things are really moving now, and that's a credit to the teamwork and the educators and our efforts to keep it alive and keep talking about it. So I do think one of the things I was considering doing is pulling the year 4 milestones into this too, and indicating like where some of those pivots are, because some of the stuff in 4 and 5, years 4 and 5 are like, that's not gonna happen now. Like, it just priority shifted. So that might have implications for how long the plan we built out on the next one. 5 might be too long of a time too, but
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing that the work is ongoing, and you just get so enmeshed in the work, you sort of lose sight of where you are relative to the milestones. And then all of a sudden, you have to recreate this whole thing when it's time to come back to school committee and report it out. And that's not what we want you to be doing. The more you can make this a living document that just gets refreshed with minimal effort on a very consistent daily, weekly basis. I mean, if you're sitting with Mona and checking in and saying, okay, where did we move the milestones? Uh, uh, as a part of your regular get together and conversation, sounds like the best strategy for me.
yeah. I think that like we have established at this point, because now we've done 2 years of it, a cycle for goals, status update. And like we did this status update thing at the end of last year
Mhm.
on last year's goals. We've tied it now into the evaluation cycle. So that's a high level cycle that enables us to start to do some lower level cycles and get more of those routine follow-ups built in to our practice. So I'm encouraged by that too. And I agree with you, Paul, like having a tool like this as a checkpoint is helpful. In the earlier years of the plan too, but like I'm glad I'm working on it, and I'm perfectly fine to keep going. I just wanted to make sure I was totally off base, so I'll check it with Glenn and see if there's any additional notes for me.
All right, that was our agenda item, 2026, 2027 goals. So unless you have anything else, Mr. Schlickman, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a very entertaining motion to adjourn.
And I will second that, and then I will call the vote. Mr. Schlickman?
Yes.
And I vote yes, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Don't melt.